Good afternoon. My name is Nina Winston, and hello, fellow Toastmasters. Today, I want to do my final research speech on human duality. I was drawn to this morning after listening to a video with Joseph Campbell talking about following your bliss, and then the gentleman asked him about ego, and I got pulled over to this. I was going to do it on something else. But I want to talk about the ego, our soul, spirit, intuition, whatever you want to term it, and our communication with it. So first I'm going to give some definitions and examples of the ego. Now the ego, from my perspective, the ego judges, it criticizes, it expenses doubt on almost anything you want to do, and it's largely fear-based. I then took to Google and I came across a really interesting article by a gentleman by the name of Frank Powell. You should really go and look it up. He talks about the 9 ways the ego keeps us from experiencing God. I'm going to go over most of them, but not all of them. Just going to read them all. The first one is the ego is highly competitive and thinks in terms of win or lose. Now we're going to be able to identify this with We're going to all be able to identify with all of these that I'm reading. Either you've experienced it or you know someone who has. It's highly competitive. The ego must be correct and does not accept contradictions. The ego hates change above all else. The greatest fear of the ego is change. The ego romanticizes the past. It idealizes the future, but it rarely lives in the present. It seeks immediate gratification and dispels anything hard or uncomfortable. And lastly, it's easily offended. Now, when I was looking at these, this wasn't my first thought, but as I began to look at these, I said, isn't this like the development of a child? Aren't we like, we've all been children, and we all embody all of these characteristics in our personality. We all hear these voices in our head. And I believe that we will spend the rest of our lives healing that child. So, as a parent, when that child is developing, do we want to separate ourselves from it? Do we want to ban it? Do we want to dispel it at all costs and just ignore it, just get rid of it, just don't, just leave it? Because that's what a lot of commentary tells us to do, to try to get ourselves away from that part of ourselves. But do we, as a parent, do we tell that child, do we give it direction? Do we lovingly let it know that we heard it? Do we tell them it's going to be okay? That we can go over here, that you don't have to be afraid? Do we just embrace it? Do we love it at all costs? Now I'm going to go over to the soul. Now I found a definition that I really liked from the Collins Dictionary of the soul. It says it's an entity which is regarded as being the immortal or spiritual part of a person, and which through having no physical or material reality is credited with the functions of thinking and willing, and hence determines all behavior. It leads and it dominates. That's back to the parent. The soul is the parent. The soul, when we understand who we are, whose we are, we understand that we could redirect all of this chatter over here. We don't have to kind of dismiss it. Listen to it. What is it telling us? Because Pema Trojan says, nothing goes away until it teaches us what we need to know. So if you have something that's constantly pressing down on you and won't leave you, it's intuition, because intuition is something that persists. and that's a a product of your soul. These are things that I believe and have come to know. Now I'm sure there are people out here who are well, far more in depth with this than I am. But my purpose here is not to change any of these definitions or debate them, in a scholarly way. It's to ask if we could have a different form of communication with ourselves, to where we're building ourselves up. We're not condemning ourselves, that we realize that we're okay, that this is the process, this is the reason for life, that without the ego, what does the soul have to do? Without the child, what does the parent, who does the parent have to correct? Who does the parent have to teach? So I'm just offering to, again, take the thoughts in your mind, hear them, and begin to talk to them and give them the direction, because you are the leader of yourself. And this is the duality of who you are. This is a part of you. It will never leave. Can't get rid of it. And then finally, the Course in Miracles says, every loving thought is true. Everything else is an appeal for healing and help, regardless of the form it takes. I'm going to read that again. Every loving thought is true. Everything else is an appeal for healing and help, regardless of the form that it takes. Be that with yourself. We want to give that. Some of us have grown to the point where we can do that for each other, but let's be able to do it for ourselves. Don't leave yourself out. This is what self-love means to me. So take this. I'm hoping that you'll look up some of the references that I gave you. I read from Pema Chodron, I read from the Course in Miracles, and I read the article that's online. And I'll just leave you with, be easy with yourself, in the words of Esther Hicks. Thank you.